The morning the F-35's first cross paths with the Mustang began like any other training day on the Nevada test range. A white silent desert broken only by the hum of distant jet engines warming up on the tarmac. The sky was cloudless, too clear, the kind of clarity that makes every machine look sharper, every sound feel louder, every moment feel more exposed. Technicians walked between the aircraft, checking panels, pressurizing lines, tightening fasteners with the quiet confidence of routine. Nothing about the opening hours hinted that the day would become one of the most controversial moments in recent Air Force memory. The F-35 pilots joked among themselves during pre-flight checks, their voices crackling over headsets. They weren't malicious, they weren't cruel. Just confident in the way pilots become when they fly machines built on the edge of modern engineering. Someone made a comment about the Mustang being a flying museum piece, and laughter followed. Someone else said it would be like racing a Tesla against a tractor. More laughter. They weren't trying to insult the aircraft. They simply couldn't imagine it being anything other than slow, harmless, outdated. To them, the P-51 Mustang belonged to textbooks, documentaries, and vintage posters hanging in training halls. A relic. Nothing more. None of them knew the man assigned to fly it. None of them knew what he carried into the cockpit. Colonel Arthur Hale didn't look like a relic either. His uniform was crisp, his stride steady, his voice calm in the way of men who had lived long enough to see arrogance collapse more than a few times. He wasn't there to prove himself, or to win anything. He had been asked to bring the Mustang for a simple heritage flight demonstration, a slow pass across the range to show visiting officials the beauty of aviation history. Nothing more, but Hale had a belief, one he never preached but carried quietly. A belief that machines built in desperate times held something modern aircraft had forgotten. Not superiority, not secrets, not magic, just memory. And memory, when ignored, had a way of resurfacing. The F-35 pilots completed their checklists quickly, confident in the computers that backed them, in the systems that monitored every pressure, every temperature, every angle of attack. Their aircraft were loaded with simulated weapons for mock intercept later in the morning. A routine scenario meant to demonstrate coordination against a slow, predictable target, a scenario that would later be torn apart in closed-door meetings for months. Hale reached the Mustang alone, running his hand across the metal surface as if greeting an old friend. The aircraft wasn't polished like the airshow Mustangs seen at public events. This one was closer to combat configuration, its surface matte, its rivets exposed, its engine tin not for show, but for endurance. The ground crew respected Hale. Even if the younger pilots didn't know him well, they knew he had flown jets no longer in service, had logged thousands of hours in cockpits now sitting in museums. They also knew he had flown the Mustang for decades, studying its temperament the way some people study their own shadow. When he climbed into the cockpit, he didn't look like a man entering a relic. He looked like a man stepping into clarity. The engine started with a violent churn, coughing smoke before settling into a deep rolling growl that cut across the tarmac like a distant storm. The F-35 pilots glanced over. One of them smirked, one raised an eyebrow. Hale didn't see them, but he would have recognized the expression. He had worn it himself, years ago, before he learned what machines could teach. The first flight of the day was simple: warm-up patterns, altitude checks, horizon passes. Hale took the Mustang out gently, feeling the wings respond, the engine settle, the vibrations smooth into predictable rhythm. Meanwhile, the F-35s launched with a roar, climbing into the open sky with the ease of machines designed to make pilots feel invincible. Their helmets projected data across the visor. Their computers read threats before their eyes did. Their engines thrust them upward faster than Hale could hope to climb. But altitude wasn't the story of the day. Ego was. The first hint of what was coming happened during a routine formation pass. The F-35s, cruising high, decided to swing closer to Hawley's Mustang for a better look. They didn't intend to crowd him, but their approach was careless, too fast, too casual, too confident. Hale saw them long before they saw him. Older pilots learned to trust eyesight more than instruments, and the Mustang's canopy gave him nearly unobstructed visibility. He eased the aircraft slightly to avoid wake turbulence, but the F-35 pilots interpreted the movement as instability. One of them commented over the radio that the Mustang didn't like being near real jets. Hale said nothing. He didn't need to. The range control officer heard the comments. So did the observers. A few exchanged looks. The day was starting to tilt. Moments later, one of the F-35 pilots suggested a mock intercept just for fun, just to warm up, just to get footage for the visiting officials. Hale declined politely, but the pilots pressed. They weren't being reckless. They simply believed the Mustang couldn't possibly challenge them. Range control finally approved a short, controlled intercept. No aggressive maneuvers, just a light pursuit simulation. When Hale heard the confirmation, he felt the shift inside him, not anger, not pride, responsibility. If they wanted to underestimate the Mustang, he would show them why underestimation was dangerous. He trimmed the aircraft, listened to the engine, leveled the wings. The F-35 set up behind him at a comfortable distance, their sensors tracking the Mustang easily. Hale kept his eyes forward, breathing steadily. He knew their speed advantage. He knew their climb rate. He knew their computers would predict his next move before he made it. But computers couldn't read intent, and intent was something Hale carried like a second heartbeat. The intercept began. Hale made the first move. Instead of trying to outrun the F-35s, he dropped the Mustang 20 feet lower, then another 20, then another, settling into a band of dense air the F-35 pilots never flew in. Their aircraft vibrated uncomfortably as they descended after him. The Mustang did not. Hale eased into a wide, sweeping turn. The F-35s followed effortlessly at first, confident, relaxed. Then Hale tightened the turn without warning. Not brutally, not recklessly, just enough. Enough to make the F-35's angle of attack limiter trigger. Enough to force the computers to take control for a fraction of a second. Enough to show that instinct could outmaneuver automation. Hale felt the pressure push against his ribs. Behind him, the F-35 pilot cursed as his aircraft forced him to widen the turn to preserve its envelope. Cameras captured everything. Range control fell silent. Hale didn't look back. He didn't need to. He knew the Mustang had just revealed the first crack, and the day was only beginning. The silence inside the control tower after Hale tightened the Mustang's turn hung like a weight no one wanted to acknowledge. The F-35 pilots didn't speak. The visiting officials didn't speak. Even the technicians watching from the sidelines felt something shift, as if the familiar hierarchy of new versus old had suddenly cracked open. Hale maintained his turn another few seconds, pushing the Mustang into an arc so smooth and deliberate that it made the modern jets look almost hesitant by comparison. Then he leveled out gently, letting the F-35s recover behind him. He could have pressed the advantage, but doing so would have crossed a line. This wasn't combat, it was a lesson, and lessons only work when the student is ready. The F-35 pilots regained formation quickly, though their voices over the radio had lost a layer of playful confidence. One of them suggested repeating the turn at a higher altitude where computer stability systems would have more margin. Hale agreed without hesitation. The challenge wasn't the problem, the misconception was. They climbed together, the Mustang's engine rumbling like distant thunder, the F-35's gliding upward with the smooth, effortless climb only modern thrust-to-weight ratios could produce. Hale knew the difference intimately. Modern jets soared on precision, the Mustang soared on will. When they reached altitude, the controller signaled the second intercept. Hale stabilized his aircraft, hands resting lightly on the stick. The F-35 pilots moved into position, their helmets projecting flight paths and approach vectors with digital clarity Hale could only imagine. He didn't envy them, he simply understood them. They believed information made them superior. Hale knew information only mattered if instinct knew what to do with it. The intercept began again, this time at a faster closure rate. Hale held steady, letting the F-35's approach. Then, with a movement so small it barely registered on the cameras, he bled just enough speed to force the lead pilot into an overtake pattern his computer didn't anticipate. The F-35 shot past him unintentionally. The second pilot cursed when Hawley's silhouette slid momentarily into his blind spot. Hale didn't chase, didn't pounce, didn't maneuver aggressively. He simply returned to his original heading as if nothing had happened, leaving the F-35 scrambling to regain position. Technicians in the control center exchanged stunned looks. One whispered, "Did he mean to do that?" Another replied, "Of course he did." Up in the sky, the F-35 pilots were no longer laughing. The tone had changed. What began as entertainment now carried embarrassment, and embarrassment was dangerous. Pride made pilots rash. Rash decisions created fractures in judgment. And fractures in judgment became mistakes. The range controller called for a pause in the demonstration, but before the signal completed its relay, Hale made a choice. He nosed the Mustang down slightly, dropping just enough altitude to settle into a denser pocket of air. The F-35s followed, though their descent was sharper than intended. Hale felt the air flow stiffen around the Mustang's wings. He could feel air pressure in his fingertips, the invisible shape of the sky pressing against the aircraft. Modern jets felt the sky through sensors. Hale felt it through the aircraft's bones. He banked into another turn, not as tight as before, but deliberate, purposeful. Enough to show the difference between a pilot who interprets data and a pilot who interprets the air itself. The F-35s tried to repeat the turn. Their computers compensated, softening angle changes, balancing inputs to prevent instability. What the computers couldn't predict was Hawley's next move. He loosened his arc just as the F-35 entered it, creating a mismatch between expected path and actual position. The lead F-35 pilot swore as his flight computer threw an advisory message. Hale remained calm, holding the Mustang's line like a painter drawing a curve he had practiced 1,000 times. After nearly 2 minutes of silent maneuvering, the range controller finally spoke, urging all aircraft to break off and reset. Hale complied immediately. The F-35s hesitated, likely processing the frustration of being maneuvered around by a machine older than every pilot on the field. As they climbed back toward the designated altitude, Hale allowed himself one deep breath. Not satisfaction, not pride, just acknowledgement. The Mustang had spoken for itself. Back on the ground, the atmosphere had become electric and unstable. Some officers whispered in disbelief, others stood rigidly, refusing to show reaction. One of the visiting officials quietly rewound the playback on his monitor, watching Hawley's turn again and again, trying to understand how something so subtle could produce such a clear positional advantage. Cole, the ranking F-35 pilot, was furious not outwardly, but buried beneath his clenched jaw and tight posture. He wasn't embarrassed by Hawley's flying, he was embarrassed by how easily he had underestimated him. When the second intercept resumed, Cole's voice over the radio was noticeably sharper. His tone lacked the earlier confidence. Hale noted it immediately. That tone belonged to a pilot trying to prove something, not understand something. And that mindset was far more dangerous than any maneuver. The F-35s swung to a wider formation this time, attempting to bracket Hale into a predictable path. Hale played along for several seconds, letting them believe he was settling into passive cooperation. But he was studying them as carefully as he studied wind patterns, engine temperature, and wing response. Modern jets flew with intention shaped by machine assistance. The Mustang flew with intention shaped by the man in the cockpit. Hale waited for the perfect moment. When the F-35s moved to tighten their bracket, he nudged the Mustang into a shallow dive, not enough to escape, but enough to distort their prediction models. Cole's computer recalculated the intercept path, adjusting control authority to keep the jet inside its envelope. Hale saw the adjustment, felt it in the air, knew exactly where the envelope would force Cole to go next. and he filled that gap. With a single, precise roll, the Mustang slid into an angle directly opposite the one the F-35 needed. It wasn't a kill. It wasn't even a dominance move. It was a message. The F-35's advantage depended on predictability. Hale had removed it. Cole shouted over the radio, demanding another attempt. His voice cracked with frustration. Hale didn't respond. The range controller denied the request, citing fuel margins and field time. They were ordered to return to base. The flight back was silent. Cole flew ahead, rigid and mechanical. Hale flew behind, calm and steady, the Mustang humming beneath him like a living memory. When they landed, the tension on the ground was palpable. Cole climbed out and walked straight toward Hale before a ground crew could intervene. Hale removed his helmet and waited. He wasn't defensive. He wasn't aggressive. He simply knew the encounter needed to happen. Cole's voice shook not with fear, but with disbelief. "How did you do that?" Hale didn't answer immediately. Instead, he rested one hand on the Mustang's canopy. "You fly the machine you have, not the machine you think you have." Cole shook his head. "That doesn't explain anything." Hale nodded slowly. "It explains everything." Cole's frustration cracked. He wasn't angry at Hale anymore. He was angry at himself for dismissing the aircraft, dismissing the pilot, dismissing the sky. Hale walked past him toward the operations building, but Cole followed. He wasn't ready to let the moment end. "What are you trying to prove?" Hale stopped. He turned. His expression was calm, almost gentle. "That your aircraft isn't your strength. You are." Cole blinked. The statement struck deeper than he expected. But Hale wasn't finished. "Modern jets give you power. They don't give you instinct." Cole opened his mouth to speak, but Hale continued walking. Cole stood alone on the tarmac, the sun beating down on him, the day suddenly heavier than he imagined it could be. Behind him, the Mustang glinted under the midday light, its metal skin carrying the scars and stories of 1,000 hours in the sky. Cole realized something that shifted the ground beneath his feet. This wasn't about old versus new. It wasn't about technology. It wasn't about horsepower or data or avionics. It was about mastery, and Hale had it. The kind of mastery that couldn't be coded, computed, or simulated. The kind born from experience, humility, and an understanding of the sky deeper than any manual could explain. The demonstration wasn't over, not officially. But in Cole's heart, something fundamental had already changed. And in the next phase of the exercise, a phase that would spiral into controversy, argument, and revelation, that change would matter more than anything else the Mustang or the F-35s could do in the air. That afternoon, the heat pressed down on the airfield like a weight, thick and unmoving, the kind of heat that made metal shimmer and wine disappear. The pilots gathered in the briefing room where tension clung to every wall, every chair, every glance exchanged between officers whose confidence had been unsettled by what they had witnessed. Cole entered last, carrying the look of a man who had spent the last hour wrestling not with another pilot but with himself. The room fell into a strained quiet when Hale stepped inside. He carried nothing but a flight folder and a calmness that frustrated some of the younger pilots who mistook it for arrogance. But Hale wasn't arrogant. He was prepared. The senior commander began the meeting with clipped authority, reviewing the footage and narrating what the cameras captured. They paused the film frequently. Each time, the Mustang's silhouette displayed something subtle the younger pilots had missed. A slight drop of the wing that forced the intercept to widen, a micro-adjustment that induced computer compensation, a speed bleed that shifted closure dynamics just enough to break predictive models. Cole watched intently, jaw tightening with each revelation. Hale didn't speak unless spoken to. He didn't try to justify anything. He didn't try to gloat. He simply explained what he had felt in the air, not what sensors showed, not what algorithms predicted, what the wind, pressure, and instinct told him. When asked why he had chosen those specific maneuvers, he answered simply that the Mustang talked if you listened. The F-35 pilots exchanged uneasy glances. Their machines didn't talk. They displayed. They warned. They projected. but they did not communicate in the way Hale described. The commander paused the video at the moment. Hale forced the first F-35 to widen its turn. "Explain it again," he demanded. Hale nodded. "Your computers protected you. They did what they were designed to do. They kept you safe." Cole frowned. "Safe from what?" Hale answered with quiet certainty. "From yourselves." The room fell silent. The words struck deeper than any maneuver had. The commander resumed the footage, showing the second intercept, the altitude shift, the envelope distortion, and the clean positioning advantage Hale earned by exploiting the very systems designed to give the F-35 dominance. Cole felt heat rise in his chest, not anger, understanding. He saw the difference not as humiliation, but as revelation. He had believed the F-35 eliminated the need for instinct. Hale had shown him instinct wasn't optional. It was everything. The meeting ended with official instructions for a final test, one not originally on the schedule, but now demanded by command. A cooperative flight, Mustang and F-35 together. Not a dogfight, not a demonstration, a test of coordination to evaluate whether the principles Hale used could be translated into formal doctrine. The idea divided the room. Some officers said it was pointless. Others argued it was essential. Hale accepted immediately. Cole hesitated only a second before agreeing. When the two men walked out of the briefing room, the sky was beginning to shift into late afternoon, long shadows stretching across the runway and the sun turning gold over the desert. The airfield felt different now, as if the ground itself sensed the significance of what was coming. Hale stopped near the Mustang, resting one hand on the worn metal skin. Cole approached him. "Why did you agree so quickly?" Hale studied the sky before answering. "Because flying isn't about proving who's better. It's about proving who's still learning." Cole let the words settle. Part of him wanted to ask 100 questions. Another part understood that he didn't need to. The real answers were waiting in the air. An hour later, both aircraft rolled onto the runway. The Mustang vibrated with its deep mechanical growl, the F-35 humming with the quiet lethal precision of modern engineering. Two eras, two philosophies, two definitions of mastery. Both pointed toward the sky. They took off almost simultaneously, climbing through layers of warm evening air until the ground transformed into abstract color patterns and the desert disappeared beneath a rising ocean of wind. Hale leveled the Mustang first, letting the aircraft settle into its natural rhythm. Cole matched his altitude, surprised at how steady the old fighter looked against the horizon. The cooperative flight was simple: formation changes, altitude adjustments, energy exchanges, and positional coordination. Nothing competitive, nothing aggressive. But something profound happened anyway. Hale led the first shift, easing the Mustang into a turn that allowed Cole to watch the aircraft as subtle energy cues, the slight nose dip before the roll, the mixture adjustment Hale made almost unconsciously, the way the plane read the air currents and responded with a language Cole had never been taught. Cole followed, mimicking the movement. His F-35 responded smoothly, but he could feel the difference. The Mustang committed. The F-35 calculated. Hale guided the second sequence with a descent that hugged a layer of dense air Cole rarely flew in. The pressure buffeted the F-35 in small, sharp vibrations. Cole tightened his grip and steadied the aircraft, realizing immediately how much he normally relied on the computer to cushion turbulence. The Mustang didn't cushion anything. It absorbed, it pushed back, it endured. Hawley's voice came through the radio, calm and even. "Feel the air, not the aircraft." Cole didn't reply. He didn't need to. He felt it. For the first time in years, he wasn't flying the F-35 the way the aircraft expected. He was flying it the way the sky demanded. The most pivotal moment came near the end of the flight. Hale signaled a coordinated low pass through a narrow valley on the edge of the range. Cole hesitated. The F-35 could do it, but modern training rarely emphasized terrain flying at low altitude. Hale descended gently, letting the Mustang slip into the valley like water flowing into stone. Cole followed, every muscle tense as the walls tightened around them. Hale maintained altitude with inch-perfect precision, using cues Cole didn't even know existed: shifts in wind tone, color changes in the rock face, micro-variations in pressure. Cole watched him, feeling the raw, humbling truth of the moment. It wasn't speed that made a pilot great. It wasn't technology. It wasn't avionics. It was awareness, presence, instinct. They exited the valley together, climbing back into open sky as the sun dipped toward the horizon. When they reached level altitude, Cole let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. Hale broke radio silence. "You feel it now?" Cole answered quietly. Yes. They flew in silence the rest of the way back, the desert stretching beneath them in long endless lines. When they landed, the airfield was nearly empty, the officials gone, the technicians packing up for the night. No crowd waited, no cameras pointed, no applause. But the moment mattered more because of it. Cole shut down his aircraft and climbed out slowly, the evening wind cooling his face. Hale walked toward him from the Mustang, his expression unreadable but calm. Cole spoke first. "I didn't understand before." Hale nodded. "Most don't." Cole stepped closer, voice steady. "But I want to learn, really learn. Not just fly the aircraft, fly the sky." Hale placed a hand on his shoulder. "Then you're ready." The two men stood beside the Mustang in the fading light as the sun bled into the horizon and the desert turned to shadow. Somewhere beyond the mountains, the world continued as usual, unaware that a single demonstration flight had challenged assumptions written into decades of doctrine. But on that quiet airfield, something irreversible had shifted. The F-35 had not lost the day. The Mustang had not won it. What happened was far more important. Modern pilots had been reminded that the sky could not be mastered through technology alone. And an old Wobbit had shown that relevance was not measured in years, but in understanding. Hale gave a final glance at the Mustang, then at Cole, then at the sky above them. "Some lessons you inherit," he said. "Others you earn." Cole felt the weight and truth of the words settle into him. He wasn't the same pilot who had taken off that morning, and he knew he never would be again. As the last light disappeared and the airfield fell quiet, one truth remained, unspoken but undeniable. The Mustang was old, but mastery was timeless. And fear was not something to avoid, it was something to learn from. The next generation of pilots would learn that lesson because one man in a 70-year-old machine had refused to be dismissed. And the sky, indifferent yet honest, had revealed exactly what fear really meant.